To finish this off, we need to add the images down here towards the bottom and, of course, the footer. So let's jump back into Dreamweaver, and if we look at what we have right now, we can see that we have a float on the left for the logo, a float on the right for the navigation system. The next section, of course, is the main section that's going to contain that large image. Right out of the gate, we know we have to clear some floats, and we need to add an image asset. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to come out of Live View. Let's go ahead and add the image. I'm going to select this placeholder text and delete it with the blinking cursor still inside that section, and you can verify that by looking at your tag selector. You can come up to the Insert menu, and from there you can choose Image, and then you can select Image again from the sub-menu. Now inside the Dope Trope local site folder, there's another folder called Project Images. In there is a file called big.jpg. You'll notice that it's 900 pixels wide. Go ahead and click Open, and you'll notice it kind of falls into place nicely here, but of course we want to control this strictly through CSS. So let's go ahead and re-expand the CSS designer. We're going to select the sitestyles.css file where we're placing all of our CSS content. We want to go ahead and create a new selector, and you'll notice that it creates a fairly robust descendant selector, but of course we just want to focus on the ID selector of main. So go ahead and get rid of everything else that's there, and we're just strictly dealing with main. Once we have this in place for the layout properties, we want to go ahead and set the width to 900 pixels, which is the width of the wrapper, but as we know, it's also the width of that main image. Now, what we also want to do, of course, is apply a clear to both. So down here towards the bottom, you'll see the clear property. Go ahead and click the both button. And we want to go ahead and add some margins here. We want to add a top margin of 10 pixels, and we also want to add some top padding. So let's go ahead and add 10 pixels of top padding as well. Now we're almost done, but if you remember from the completed example, there was a horizontal rule separating the main content from the header content. So in order for us to create that, we want to come over to the border section. And of course, if you look at all these different categories here, this, of course, is the border section, the middle button. If you click it, it brings you right to the border section, which is incredibly nice. What we want to do is set a border color of black. We don't want a border around all four sides. We really only want a top border. So we're going to go ahead and set the top border to a pixel value of 1 pixel. Now, let's just go ahead and make sure that this is, in fact, going to render the way that we want it to render. Let's go ahead and save the document. In fact, you can come up to the File menu and choose Save All, which will save the style sheet file and the HTML document. Let's go ahead and take a look at it in a web browser inside of Safari. You'll notice we're not getting that border to appear. So let's come back into Dreamweaver and see what's going on. You'll notice right now, if we look at the border properties, we have a color assigned for the border, so that's good. The top width is set to 1 pixel. But, of course, what we don't have is a border style. So let's go ahead and set this to solid. That should solve the problem. Let's come back to the File menu and choose Save All and preview it in a web browser again. And now we're getting that border to appear, which really looks like a horizontal rule. That's great. So let's come back to Dreamweaver. What we have to deal with now are the two article elements. Now, we could add the images straight away, or we could manipulate the CSS properties. It's really completely up to you. To make things a little bit easier to identify visually, I'm going to go ahead and insert the images right away. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the placeholder text. I'm then going to come up to the Insert menu, and from there you can select Image, and then you can choose Image from the sub-menu. The image that we want is called sub1.jpg. You'll notice that the dimensions are 438 by 200. The 438 is the more important value. Go ahead and click Open, and let's scroll down a little bit and do the exact same thing here for Article 2. Go to the Insert menu, choose Image, select Image again, and this time we're going to go with sub2.jpg. So, of course, we need to style these two elements. We can see that we have IDs applied to these of Article 2, and I believe the other one's Article 1. So if we remember that, we can come over to sitestyles.css, create a new selector. Let's go ahead and just call it Article 1. After we create that selector, we want to go ahead and apply a couple different properties here. The first thing that we want to do is set the width to 438. Now, 438, of course, is the width of the image. But if you multiply 438 times 2, it's going to come to a value of 876. 876, of course, is 24 pixels less than the 900 pixel width of the main image and the wrapper. And so we can easily create a gutter between these two images by using floats. So what we want to do is float this to the left. Once we float this to the left, the other image will get pulled up right away. A couple other things that we want to apply to this box. We want to add a little bit of margin to the top and to the bottom. So here, we're going to add 24 pixels of margin to the top. We're going to do the same thing down here towards the bottom. What this will do is create a horizontal gutter, if you will, of 24 pixels. And remember, we're going to get a vertical gutter of 24 pixels between the two images once we set up the properties for this second image. So I think we're in good shape in terms of the different properties we want to apply to the first article. Let's go ahead and create another selector now for the second article. So in the selectors section of the CSS Designer, click the plus sign. And of course, we want to target article 2 in this case. Once you set that up, the width, of course, will also be set to the same value of 438, but we want to go ahead and float this to the right. And now we get that gutter to appear in between the two images. Let's go ahead and add some margin here of 24 pixels on the top and 24 pixels on the bottom. So there we go. I think we're in good shape in terms of getting these images to be positioned where we want them. Of course, we just need to control the appearance of the footer. Now, the footer shouldn't have this placeholder text, but rather some copyright information. So I'll go ahead and type in copyright 2013 dope trope. And if you want a copyright sign to appear down here towards the bottom, you can do that. Place a blinking cursor in front of the C. Go to the Insert menu, and from the Insert menu, you can choose Character, and from there, you can choose Copyright. And that's going to add that special character for you. Right now, it's floating up here towards the bottom. Don't worry about that. Let's come over to the CSS Designer and highlight sitestyles.css. We're going to go ahead and add a new selector. Of course, this is going to be the footer selector, so go ahead and type in #footer. And once you create that selector, what we want to do is control a couple different properties here. The first thing that we want to do is we want to control the appearance of the type. So let's come over to the text category, set the color to black. The font family is going to be that web font, which is Source Sans Pro. In terms of the font size, we're going to go ahead and set this to M's. We're going to set it to 1M. After doing that, I think we're okay in terms of text properties. Let's come back to layout properties. Of course, what we want to do is clear both floats. That will drop that copyright sign down towards the bottom. We also want to apply some padding. We want to add 10 pixels of top padding. We also want to add 24 pixels of top margin. The last thing that we want to do is add a border so we get that horizontal rule look again. So we're going to come over to the border section. For the border section, we're going to set the border color to black. Notice I just applied this to the top this time instead of border color. It doesn't really matter. You're going to get the same result. But you want to set the border width to 1 pixel. So go ahead and set that to 1 pixel. And of course, we want to make sure we're doing this for the top, not for all 4 sides. So again, I'm going to come over here and select pixels, type in 1. And in terms of the border style, again, border top style, we're going to set that to solid. So I think we're in good shape. I think we set up everything that we need to set up to get this content to appear the way that we want it to appear. So again, you can come over to the File menu, and from the File menu, you can choose Save All. Go ahead and preview this in Safari. This is the completed example. This is what we created. This is what we were looking at earlier. You'll notice they're pretty much identical. If you want to control the weight of the font, you can go ahead and change those values. But for the most part, we have this page looking the way that we want it to look. And we used everything we learned in this chapter in terms of working with the different properties to control the location of your content, ultimately controlling the visual presentation of the content. So at this point, you know how to structure an HTML document, and you know how to control the visual presentation.